I think there was, I think it was UK. This person was going to open up. It was like albino king cobras. Chitte sige. They look fascinating. To be honest, there were 7, 8 of them he had. And he goes, I feed these, and these snakes never, will never, ever turn on me. वो सापड़े उन्होंने बड़ उन्होंने मार देता सगा. The snake bit him, this king cobra, and he died, And those are examples. Gurbani uses it a lot. But sap is not your saka, ਸੱਪ ਕਿਸ ਦਾ ਸਕਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. You can do what you want to. ਜਿੰਨਾ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਕਰ ਲਓ, eventually ਉਹਨੇ ਡੰਗ ਮਾਰ ਦੇਣਾ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ. And that's what Guru describes Maya as. ਮਾਇਆ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾ ਜਿੰਨੀ ਮਰਜ਼ੀ ਕਰੀ ਜਾਓ, you can say ਸੁੱਖ ਮਿਲਦਾ, eventually ਉਸ ਮਾਇਆ ਨੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਖਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਆ, even if it's ਅੰਤਕਾਲ ਵਿੱਚ, when we pass away. So we discovered Chit last week. It's our memory and also our emotions that are associated with that memory. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਚਿੱਤ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹੀਦਾ, ਚਿੱਤ ਕਹੀਦਾ. We discussed that last week. We did some exercises that we can do 2 things at once, and we did a couple of exercises where I told you to trying to think about your house while we're sitting here, and then we did another one where you think about these words, the bachan, while we're doing something else. And if you could think of a bachan like that, then it's like asi gur mantar bhi eda cheta kar sakde hai na. If you can remember those words, like last week you remembered the words, but we still did 3 other things. You can still remember the Gur Mantar like that. So asi Vaheguru nu chette vich rakh ke we can still do our kam, And Gurbani on Chit, and we did discuss that, what Gurbani says about Chit. Namdev and Tarlochan, how Tarlochan said Namdev Maya Moya, Tarlochan said Mera Chit lag gaya. And we went through Chit in times of distress, by if Chit lag jave Vaheguru vich, even the worst times in our life, jede vich koi nange bhukh ki peer hove, we're in a poor state, or just ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਕੋਈ ਦੁਸ਼ਮਣ ਲੱਗੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ, ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਚੇਤੇ ਆ ਜਾਵੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ, ਉੱਥੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ. And there were 5 examples there about like the boy flying the kite, the cow, and all those different things, and the mother looking after the baby. Now this week is the final week, so what we're going to do is, I didn't get a chance to ask you questions, but I've devised them. So we're going to answer 12 questions. 12 questions and answers on Dukh and Sukh. So the first question here is, if Guruji says Dukh and Sukh are the same, like gold and dust, why does emotional pain feel so overwhelming and real in the body and mind? Is this just my representation system, or is there something deeper happening spiritually? So the first question, and these are the kind of things that were discussed. Week 1, Dukh, Sukh, equality, that they're the same. Emotional interpretation of personal pain. Week 3 was internal representation, Chit, the storage, and NLP processing. And in week 9, we discovered Chit, emotional memory, distress, remembrance, that kind of thing. So this is true. When we think about, we could say, okay, I might ignore the happiness, but the sadness is really bad. The sadness makes us feel, how can we treat that the same as happiness? That's a common question. So when we look at this, when we get pain, it's felt by the body and the nervous system. So you have to remember that our body reacts to that. Our nervous system does as well. But sometimes it requires some healing time. So it may be that it's painful for a period, then a realization happens that starts seeing something else from that experience. So nobody's saying, today you got pain, and automatically you should quickly transfer it to something else. That's kind of not real, really. Sometimes you have to go through the pain a little bit, feel it, and then you have to try and see why Guru the message ki hai. So when Gurbani talks about Dukh and Sukh, it's not just a theory, it's something that is felt. By just knowing that this is how I should think is not enough. It takes a lot of love for Vaheguru. So when you love Vaheguru a lot, ਫਿਰ ਦੁੱਖ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲੱਭ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ, but ਉਹ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਪਿਆਰ ਆ, that's different. It's not just a theory. It's not something I just say today now I don't feel any dukh anymore. I'll just regard it as something else. It's not like that. That's just a theoretical way of looking at it. So there's 12 questions like this. Let me shut this down. So question 2. So if pain reduces with a wider Sikhi view, why do some Gursikhs still experience depression, grief or anxiety? Is that a lack of understanding? Is it their karma? Is it that they're weak on Naam or something else? So these are things we discussed in week 2, 6, 7, 9, little things like that. What is it then? What do you guys think? Why do Gursikhs get it then? ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਪਾਠ ਕਰਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਬਾਣੀ ਪੜ੍ਹਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਕੱਲ੍ਹ ਹੀ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਹੈ Some people say this as well. They say Amar Shakandi ki Lord. Look how dukhi these people are. Then if why Guru help them? I've heard some people say about ਜਿਹੜੇ Sikh ਵੀ ਸੀਗੇ ਜਦੋਂ Mati Das, Sati Das, if they were not next to Guru, how come that happened to them? ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤਾਂ ਆਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਚੀਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ and things like that. What's that? What do you think is the answer? I could quickly give you an answer. No? That's something not beneficial. Haji, Hukam vich rehna, yeah. Pishli kaam, so everybody's got them, na? So everybody's got. So if you look at it, just because someone is a Gursikh, it does not mean that karma does not affect them, na? That doesn't make you karma proof. And just because someone has a knowledge or looks like a Sikh does not mean that they live by Guruji's words. Guruji says, sat karke manani bani, is hard, that is. If you look at Gurbani, बहुत औखियां चीज़ां महाराज कह रहे हैं to you as well. भी हुन तो सुत्ता कर ले उठ सुत्ता कर ले उठ है ना, and he's telling you to do it at different times where you don't want to do it. Then he's saying तेरे मन विच why you thinking bad for that person? पर का बुरा ना रखो चीत. But automatically man does all those things. So just because a person is a Gursikh doesn't mean that they're. In fact, I've found that sometimes people who aren't done Amrit are sometimes a bit better. Sometimes. Gurbani is not trying to delete our experiences so that a Gursikh becomes free from Dukh. It's just trying to show us how to get transformed, how Dukh gets transformed, to a bigger picture that's beyond the current experience. So Guru's not trying to say to us, Tanu Dukh nahi milna hona. ਹੁਣ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਲੇ ਬਣ ਜਾਓ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਣਾ ਇਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ that's not what Guru saying. Guru ji saying ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਬਣ ਗਏ ਤੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ shows you that ਦੁੱਖ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ look at the bigger picture. You got a bigger picture, whereas a person who's a mayatari, he's got a small picture. ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਪਿਕਚਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਘਰ ਆ ਮੇਰੀ ਜੌਬ ਆ ਮੇਰੇ ਪੈਸੇ ਆ ਮੇਰੀ ਪ੍ਰਭਤਾ ਆ my reputation. That's their world. It's a small world. And Gurbani calls that ਖੂਹ ਦਾ ਡੱਡੂ ਹੈ ਨਾ कूप पर्यो जैसे दादरा किश देश विदेश ना सूझ. It's he's like a frog in a well. ਉਹਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਕੰਧਾਂ ਹੀ ਦਿਸਦੀਆਂ it doesn't see that there's a world outside. Waheguru makes Gurbani shows you there's a big picture, ਵੱਡੀ picture ਆ. So it's not saying to you ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਣਾ. Guru says ਦੁੱਖ ਸੁੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ physically. And there's shows Guru Tegh Bahadur ਜੋ ਨਰ ਦੁੱਖ ਮੈਂ ਦੁੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨੈ. ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਨਸਾਨ ਦੁੱਖ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਨਹੀਂ ਮੰਨਦਾ ਸੁੱਖ ਸਨੇ ਅਰ ਭੈਣੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਕੰਚਨ ਮਾਟੀ ਮਨ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਿੱਟੀ ਤੇ ਸੋਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ ਸੁੱਖ ਸਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁੱਖ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ they don't want ਸੁੱਖ like that ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੁੱਖ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਠੀਕ ਆ but the end of that shabd it talks about all these ਬਈ ਗੁਰ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਜੇ ਨਰ ਕੋ ਕੀਨੀ ਤੈਂ ਇਹ ਜੁਗਤ ਪਛਾਨੀ ਨਾਨਕ ਲੀਨ ਪਿਆ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੋ ਪਾਣੀ ਸੰਗ ਪਾਣੀ ਜੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰੇ then ਇਨਸਾਨ ਇਹ ਜੁਗਤੀ ਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਦਾ this method then they understand it. ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਪਾਣੀ ਜਿਹਦਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਪਾਣੀ ਪਾਇਆ ਦੇਈਦਾ you can't find where the water went. that's what ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਜੋਤ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਰਲ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਆ. so it just because someone's Gursikh it doesn't mean ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਰਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੇ. it doesn't mean that it could be that they're weak on ਨਾਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਭਰੋਸਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ. that could be true. It could be lack of understanding as well. It's surprising how low understanding of Gurmat is. When we've been around the world into Gursikh places, it's surprising how low it is. No? So the IQ on Sikhi is low. I think that's a fair statement. On question 3, if my current dukh is due to karma from this or from a previous lives, how do I avoid feeling defeated or guilty about my suffering? Where's compassion for myself in this framework or path? Now, that's a great set of questions there. No? And we covered these in these weeks. If anyone wanted to go and refer back to them, but from previous lives, how do you stop? You can say, I'm just a bad person. ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੇ ਦਾ ਕਰਮ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਾੜੇ ਆ ਮੈਂ ਕੀ ਕਰ ਸਕਦਾ forget it man. ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲੋਂ ਮਰਨਾ ਚੰਗਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ. How do you stop with that then? Do something good, yeah. Do something good. Just because your past was like that doesn't mean your future has to be like that. No? Just because something from your past has made you what it is today doesn't mean your future's finished. So when you look at some of these things here, our life is for planting new seeds, but also to experience the effects of our past ones. So ਜਿਹੜੇ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਸੀ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਭੁਗਤਣੇ ਪੈਂਦੇ ਆ, you have to, you know. And you know when we read Japji Sahib, ਆਪੇ ਬੀਜ ਆਪੇ ਹੀ ਖਾਓ ਨਾਨਕ ਹੁਕਮੀ ਆਵੋ ਜਾਓ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਬੀਜਿਆ ਉਹ ਖਾਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ. And when you eat it, ਫਿਰ ਆਵਾ ਗਾਉਣ ਉਹ ਮਿਟਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. It carries on. So by being compassionate to yourself, you can actually reduce your home. So just because you're compassionate to yourself, that doesn't mean you're bad. That doesn't mean home. That means reducing it. For instance, if you say to yourself, Gurbani gives us a lot of help here. Man pyarya jiyo mitra gobind naam samhale. Guru talks to man like pyara mitra. Pyara mitra. That's being compassionate to ourselves. Man mara nahi hega, it's just got bad habits. It's just picked up a bad environment. It's been in bad environments. It's not bad. You're not bad. Human beings not bad. We want to be bad, or we like being bad, or we're okay with being bad. Then that's different. If mere karma making me sit with Sangat, ya chor, ya jire yaar ya, Gurbani says chor, yaar, juar, ਇਹ ਮਾੜੇ ਆ in ਦੁਨੀਆ ਵਿੱਚ. ਇੱਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਚੋਰੀ ਕਰਦਾ ਆ, yari is ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਰਾਈ ਇਸਤਰੀ ਨਾਲ ਪੁੱਠਾ ਕੰਮ, someone who does adultery, and a juar is ਜਿਹੜਾ gambling ਕਰਦਾ ਆ, is a gambler. Guru calls them ਇਹ ਮਾੜੇ ਆ. If I'm like that and I want to remain like that, ਫਿਰ ਤਾਂ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਮੇਰੀ ਗਲਤੀ ਆ, and now I'm bad. But our man is not bad. ਮਨ ਮਾੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਚਿੱਤ ਕਠੋਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਆ, ਅੰਦਰ ਜਿਹਾ ਵਸਿਆ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗਿਆਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਸ ਕਪਟੀ ਗਿਆਨ ਆ. So you have to be compassionate to yourself. Gurbani is, it understands ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਨ is a jyot ਸਰੂਪ, ਇਹ ਜੋਤ ਆ really. And by accepting our current situation and remaining conscious to live a more connected life, we're actually burning our karma actually. ਅਸੀਂ karma ਨੂੰ ਸਾੜਦੇ ਹਾਂ by doing that. So you don't know ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਹੋਣਾ ਸੀਗਾ ਉਹ ਘਟ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ. And you know, the opposite is true as well. Where Guru says, Har bisarat tere gun galya. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜਦੋਂ ਵਿਸਰ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਆ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਚੰਗੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵੀ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਫਿਰ. You don't get the good thing either. ਉਹ ਗਲ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਆ. So it's dynamic. Life's dynamic. So we can do bad things now. And ਜਿਹੜੀ ਚੰਗੀ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਫਿਰ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ takes it away. So we can make our situation a whole lot better, but we can certainly make our future better. So even if we're in Dukh from our past janam, past karam pichle, we can make that situation different. ਉਹ ਸਾਡੀ ਬਿਰਤੀ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਆ. So how you think about that situation. So Vaheguru will take you out of it. If you believe Vaheguru can take you out of that, you have ਪੂਰਾ ਭਰੋਸਾ. ਵੀ ਬਾਬਾ ਬਿਖ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਸੰਸਾਰ, ਇਹ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਨਾ, ਵੀ ਬਾਬਾ ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਤਾਂ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਜ਼ਹਿਰ ਹੀ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਇੱਥੇ, nothing else. ਰੱਖਿਆ ਕਰੋ ਗੁਸਾਈ ਮੇਰੇ, ਮੈਂ ਨਾਮ ਤੇਰਾ ਆਧਾਰ, ਵੀ ਮੇਰੀ ਰੱਖਿਆ ਕਰੋ, look after me. ਹੁਣ ਮੈਂ ਤੇਰਾ ਨਾਮ ਮੈਂ ਆਧਾਰ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ ਆ. We've taken ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ, ਉਹ ਆਧਾਰੇ ਲੈ ਲਿਆ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ. We just renting it really. ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਵੀ ਉਹ ਹਿਰਦੇ 'ਚ ਵਸ ਜਾਵੇ, ਫਿਰ ਪ੍ਰਕਾਸ਼ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ. That's what we're trying to do. So just because your situation is bad, you still have to love it. Eventually you have to love it. And so, sometimes ਅੱਜ ਵੀ people ਕਹਿੰਦੇ they use mindfulness and things like that. Did you know that some people can't close their eyes? Some people can't close their eyes. People whose trauma is really bad, closing their eyes brings back something really horrible for them. So sometimes closing their eyes, they can't internally ja nahi sakde. They have to be healed of that pain. But I'm saying if you are okay with everything and you can relax and you can look internally, see what's going on, you have to fall in love with what's going on. But je andar kapati challi jandi hai, Gurbani talks about that, which kutilta challi jandi andar. Silly thoughts, silly sochani, silly hopes and desires. Then you're not going to fall in love with. When you have Gurbani with you, then you start looking at that saying, I don't want to be like that anymore. So that's the internal change that happens. That's what you've got to do in our life. It's an internal change, Clock ain't working today. So question 4. So we did a session on churning water ਨਾ ਵੀ ਦੁੱਧ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਰਮ ਜਿਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਚੰਗੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਦੁੱਧ ਦਾ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਆਮਨ ਜਦੋਂ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਦੇ ਉਹ ਰਿੜਕਦੇ ਆ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕਰਮਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਕਰਮਾਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਰਸ ਮਿਲਦਾ ਆ that's where ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਰਸ comes from it's where your karma ਚੰਗੇ so if you do ਮਾੜੇ ਕਰਮ and then I say ਮੈਂ ਬਹਿ ਕੇ ਹੁਣ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਣਾ ਆ ਗੁਰੂ says ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹਿਰਦੇ ਕਪਟ ਮੁੱਖ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਝੂਠੇ ਕਹਾਂ ਬਿਲੋ ਵਸ ਪਾਣੀ ਪਈ ਹਿਰਦਾ ਕਪਟੀ ਆ ਮੁੱਖ ਤੋਂ ਤੂੰ ਗਿਆਨੀ ਹੁਣ ਬਣ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਹੁਣ ਤੂੰ ਪਾਣੀ ਬਲੋਂਦਾ ਹੁਣ there's no ਦੁੱਧ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ so how do I know if my career, family, responsibilities or ambitions are meaningful engagement or just water churning? And that's a great question. I'm doing my day-to-day life. We're doing all our sanbandh keh lo. ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਸੰਜੋਗ ਆ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ whatever they are. But how do ਪਾਣੀ ਦਾ ਬਿੱਲ ਹੋਣਾ ਆ or what? ਹੈ and sometimes anything that's temporary will give temporary results. I think you should remember that. If something's temporary, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ temporary ਚੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲਣੀ ਆ that's why Guru says ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੀ ਬਾਣੀ ਤੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਬਚਨ ਅਸਥਿਰ ਆ they stay forever ਵੀ ਨਾਮ ਰਹਿਓ ਸਾਧੂ ਰਹਿਓ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਨਾਮ ਵੀ ਸਦਾ ਲਈ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਧੂਆਂ ਦੇ ਹਿਰਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਸ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਨਾਮ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਦਾ ਲਈ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਰਹਿਓ ਗੁਰੂ ਗੋਬਿੰਦ ਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨੇ ਸਦਾ ਲਈ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆ those things stay forever everything else ਕਹੋ ਨਾਨਕ ਇਹ ਜਗਤ ਮੈਂ ਕਿਨ ਜਪਿਓ ਗੁਰਮਤਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਮੰਤਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਮੰਤਰ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦਸ ਨਾਮ and also ਨਾਮ ਨਾਲ ਉਪਦੇਸ਼ ਇਹ ਮੰਤਰ ਆ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ and ਨਾਮ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ saying ਕਿਨੇ ਜਪਿਓ ਕੋਈ ਵਿਰਲੇ ਕਿਨ ਦਾ means doesn't mean ਕਿਨ means ਕਿਸੇ ਵਿਰਲੇ ਨੇ only ਥੋੜਿਆਂ ਨੇ ਜਪਣਾ ਹੈ ਇਹ so anything is temporary will give you temporary result our career family ambitions are there to make our existing situation better ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਿਹਾ ਵੀ ਗ੍ਰਸਤੀ ਜੀਵਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਇਹ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਛੱਡ ਕੇ ਕੋਈ ਯੂ ਨੋਟ ਗੋਇੰ ਟੂ ਗੋ ਇਨ ਜੰਗਲਸ ਤੇ ਫੋਰੈਸਟਸ ਨਾ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆ so that's for making our situation better we have to be realistic and know that we have to live so balance in life is very important too as we are not hermits ਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਈ we're not ਉਦਾਸੀਜ਼ ਨਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਪਏ ਉਦਾਸੀ ਬਣ But he says, become udasi, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਭੋਗ ਕੇ by tasting it, by feeling it, by doing it. But while you're living in this world, Guru saying, ਉਹ ਅੰਦਰ ਉਦਾਸ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਿੱਖਿਆ ਪਏ ਹੋਂ ਸਦ ਕੇ ਤੇ ਨਾ ਗੁਰਸਿੱਖਾਂ ਭਾਈ ਗੁਰਦਾਸ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਮਾਇਆ ਅੰਦਰ ਕਾਰਨ ਉਦਾਸੀ ਮਾਇਆ ਵਿੱਚ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ you're going to drive nice cars, you're going to live in nice houses, ਹੈ ਨਾ ਪਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਦਾਸ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਆ ਉਹ ਚੀਜ਼ that's not going to define who you are, ਹੈ ਨਾ But some good questions about things we do in life are these. What's increasing in your life? If you look at apni life nu dekho in the last year, jo karma ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀਤੇ ਆ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕਰਮਾਂ ਕਰਕੇ ਸਿਮਰਨ ਵਧਿਆ distraction ਵਧਿਆ in because of that ਸਾਡੇ ਹਉਮੈ ਵਧੀ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਨਿਮਰਤਾ ਵਧੀ ਆ humility or ego what's grown in the last year is fear of losing it painful to your mind ਜਿਹੜੀ temporary ਚੀਜ਼ ਆ we can develop irrational fears of saying if I lose that pata nahi mera ki banunga so that means I'm really attached to it it's loss collapse your identity so we've associated so many things with who we are my identity when we do the identity one sometimes we're saying my identity is my house my identity is my job title my identity is my jat paat you know and all of that guru saying no so if you lose that thing if I take that away anything that you're doing in your life if I take it away it might be your greh and your family some people bahut maan hai pe asi aise khandaan vich ya a lot of maan I don't want to go off on a tangent but someone rang me once and he said I want to have a mixed marriage at your Gurdwara because nah ਤੇ ਮਿਕਸ ਮੈਰਿਜ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ ਇੱਥੇ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਐਂਡ ਹੀ ਗੋਜ਼ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਮੈਂ ਕੌਣ ਆ ਬਿਕਾਜ਼ ਹੂ ਆਰ ਯੂ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਐਸ ਫੈਮਿਲੀ ਦਾ ਹੀ ਮੈਂਸ਼ਨਡ ਅ ਨੇਮ ਆਈ ਐਮ ਨਾਟ ਗੋਇੰ ਟੂ ਨੇਮ ਦੈਟ ਨੇਮ ਆਈ ਕਾਂਟ ਰਿਮੈਂਬਰ ਵਾਟ ਇਟ ਵਾਸ ਇਜ਼ ਦੈਟ ਅਨਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਟੂ ਮੀ you know a gill or a sandhu or something like that ਨਾ I go so what ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਇਹ ਖਾਨਦਾਨ ਦਾ ਆ you are gonna because we're not gonna have that marriage here ਗੱਲ finished see you later but the point is, on Mansiga, there is some, I don't know, maybe the gangsters or something, you know. or is it using you? Now that's a key question. Is that thing using you, or are you using it? That's nagani, jo mara kehande sap a, or sap ne kha lena hai insaan nu. So this is how we live. So hopefully this is all making sense, everything we've been doing every week, But I'm going to try and go through it quickly as can. But question 5, if a naam is the truth, why does it sometimes feel dry, mechanical, or emotionally flat when I do naam japana? Am I doing it wrong, or is this part of the process? What do you reckon? Based on what we were talking about. So we covered some things there. Naam's importance was week 6. Week 5 was negative self-talk, internal resistance. A training chit we did last week. What is it then? If a naam we say, it's a बहुत boring चीज़ है. Why is that? Why boring. Why is it boring? Je chit launa ਔਖਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ. Chit launa is ਚੀਜ਼ ਵਿੱਚ. And if you look at these, our mind has been so used to movement, stimulation, does not want to sit still. So ਮਨ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਫਿਲਮ ਲਾ, ਮਨ ਤਾਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਫੋਨ ਕਰਕੇ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ. ਮਨ is saying ਕੋਈ let's do some dancing, ਟੱਪਣਾ stuff like that, है ना? It's a music ਲਾ ਕੋਈ. So it go drrrr in his brain, है ना? So ਉੱਥੇ you're taking that man and saying ਹੁਣ ਤੂੰ ਬਹਿ ਜਾ ਆਰਾਮ ਨਾਲ. He's saying nah. What are you making me? It's a torture, yeah. So this is described as a loony chutney, है ना? Bhai Gurdas ne bhi a loony chutney kiya hai nu. Initially it's like a brick or a sputter. You see, ਉਹਦੇ ਤਾਂ flavor ਮਿਲਣਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੋਈ from it. But he says you have to go through that. You have to do that first. First we start with being disciplined, and just taking time out initially has good positive effect. I never used to do part, है ना? When I first started doing part, and I had massive change. That's a huge change on you. If you get up and say, the first thing I'm going to do, my Vaheguru remember, and you're never done that before. Massive change. Probably had loads of more spiritual experience then afterwards, है ना? That you just, something different happened. Something different, है ना? So just by taking time at the beginning helps you loads. Even if your man lagda, nahi lagda, it doesn't make no difference. Koi fark nahi bana. So we cannot do naam japana for an experience. So some people, why can't I feel something? That question is really bad. That's a bad question. Because when you look, you do not expect anything back. If I was doing Vaheguru Simran, and then I said, Vaheguru, mera anhad shabad da bajda nahi koi, and 10th gate hasn't opened yet. On thodi seva us level di hegi ya, what are you asking for? So sometimes we have to just say, Vaheguru knows better. And Gurbani says, Pure ka kiya sab kish pura kat vad kish na hai. Pura, Maharaj pura is pure. Pure da kiya sab pura ya, kat vad nahi hona. Not going to give extra, kat na bhi nahi kuch bhi. Not going to give you any less, na? So a lot of emotion that is required, and a lot of emotion is required. And that takes time. It takes time for you to build love. Love that you don't wake up and say you love something. Kirtan and Sangat is a great way of trying to adopt that in your life. So that Maharaj ne sokha bhi banaya sadhe lai. Guruji says, jado Kirtan Sangat beh ke kar diya, if you experience that, Sangat beh ke jado kar diya, and then you switch the lights off and just say, don't care about anything now. Don't care about anything. Then that your emotion aa janda hai, naturally aa janda utte. Then you have to use that. You have to use it. Us emotion nu fir tusi onu bhagati banana hai, what you experienced there. No? So question 6, sorry, we're halfway through. You explained that fear of relational to love and bairag. That's it. But how do I develop that fear in a healthy way without becoming anxious or spiritually afraid? You know? So these are the weeks when we covered that, week 8, 4 and 2. You can watch them, they're on the internet. But so that's a good question. You know? Because sometimes when we talk about fear, you think fear is something like, fear is me being scared all the time. But Maharaj didn't describe it like that. No? So Maharaj when it discusses our fear is to be in awe of Waheguru, to be aware and to see Waheguru close by in what we do in life. ਇਹ ਡਰ ਆ, ਇਹ ਗੁਰਮਤ ਡਰ ਆ. Number one, by Waheguru ta beyant ਆ. That's what the Shabds are saying. Tu beyant ko virla jane. Then fear comes. With ਡਰ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਹਨਾ? Second thing is to be aware. We say, Maharaj says, Pekhat sunat sada hai sange, मैं मूर्ख जाने दूरी रे. But he sees everything, he hears everything, and he's close by all the time. But मैं मूर्ख as a fool, मैं समझ में वाहिगुरु बहुत दूर आ. That's what our fear is, you know? And we fear being separated for longer than we already have. If a Sikh understands, I've been bichhade aaya, I've been separated for life forms, you know? Lifetimes. When you get some closeness to Waheguru, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿਣਾ, I hope I don't lose that. ਉਹ ਡਰ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ, and that ਡਰ is your ਪਿਆਰ. ਉਹ ਡਰ ਪਿਆਰ ਬਣ ਜਾਂਦਾ. That's how it converts, you know? So when we get anxious from a spiritual perspective, we are usually protecting. So ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ego ਵਾਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗੀ, ਪਰ ਡਰਨਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਥੋੜਾ ਵੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਡਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ. It's not for that. It's the fear of Waheguru done with Guruji's guidance removes our ego, creates a place of love, and that's what it's doing. First it starts with dar, it doesn't start with love first. It starts with dar, so that dar is not negative, that dar is not destructive. Or positive cheeza. That's how we look at it. So question 7, if we can change our emotional state through language and internal representation. So when we said in NLP saying this neuro is jo brain vich chalda, linguistic jo mukh te chalda hai, and programming is jo asi karma karde hain. If we can just change it like that by changing a few things, hardly bypassing real trauma, is there danger in reframing it too quickly? And that's week 1, 3, 5 and 9 if anyone wants to watch those. But Hanji, so that's a really important and good question. Is that if I get Dukh quickly to want to reframe it, I just frame that as something different. So sometimes you can't do that. No? So the simple answer is yes. There is a danger of reframing it too quickly. And because we have to understand our trauma before. Sometimes, when you need counselling, and sometimes Gursikhs need counselling sometimes too. You might need to have that, because it just depends on how much spiritually Guruji's given you kirpa. But sometimes you might need help there, because you have to understand the trauma before you can transform it. If you haven't got an understanding of it, I say understanding, but sometimes it's a safe place you're making. You're trying to make a safe place so that you can move on from it, and sometimes that doesn't happen. So you can try to bypass it too quickly, and sometimes it needs professional help that should not be dismissed. And that's what I started in week 1 as well. But there are many shabds that help here, since they talk about giving our pain to Waheguru. So, four shabds are, where it says, Dukh Sukh pyare to jate aayi, is mat Guru te pai. Main Guru to mat e le liya, but even if it's Dukh, even if it's Sukh, for Waheguru de main bhakti karni hai. And we says, I give my Dukh and my Sukh. Mera Dukh Sukh tujh hi paas. Gurbani keh rahi hai, my Dukh and my Sukh main thwade paas de deta sara. And so Gurbani is not always about, there are many shabds here, since they talk about giving our pain to Waheguru, but Gurbani is not always about the real. It describes all the stages of life, where that is connected, or whether it's connected or disconnected. So we are not just trying to think differently, we are changing who we are. I know that's bored. It's a big difference between just saying, I've got a mental change here, to being something new. And this is called Choncha Gyan and Tat Gyan. Ek Choncha Gyan where it's just theory, and ek Tat Gyan where the person's changed, they're actual properly changed. That becomes you now. So when we read Gurbani, as we were saying earlier, Gurbani does not just talk about meeting Waheguru. It talks about Manamukh. It talks about our low stages. It talks about Mere Ram, Nij Karma Har Mere. Is Ardasa. There's Ardasa in there for us to say, Asi bon Nij Sade Kam Jere Si Karde Hain. There's Ardas there. There's Bhakti there. There's Dukh Sukh there. There's Mangana there, how to ask. There's all sorts of things in Gurbani. So sometimes it just says, this is all about how to meet God, which it is. That's the baseline of everything that's said in Gurbani. But that's not nuanced enough to actually understand Gurbani. But beautiful cheez in the poetry how Maharaj has written it. So we are not just trying to think differently, we're changing who we are. So ignoring pain is very different from transforming pain. And this is an important point to remember. So again, when we talked about addicts, I talk about addicts. Sometimes addiction, when they're drinking sharab, it's not the sharab that's the problem. It's the underlying cheese they just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to bring it out. And that's the thing that's making them the addict. So trying to close it down instead of releasing it. So sometimes that a person who's not using a substance can cause themselves problems by doing that. If you're holding on to something really tight and that thing's distressing, damaging, it needs to be released somehow. It needs to be released. What Gurbani is doing is talking to Waheguru, है ना? That all relationship हो गया मेरे ख्याल में उन्होंने तो कोई issue तो कदे होना नहीं है. But we haven't got that, है ना? Because we haven't got that. Sometimes you just make it out that everybody said just do that, and everyone you just sort your duck out. You're a loser, है ना? It's not like that. It's not like that. We are all losers. These are losers. We wouldn't be born here. We've taken a janam for a reason. So you've got to remember, everybody's different and we develop differently. So you can't just hold it down to this is the rule and this is how you do it. Sometimes you need help. Sometimes the biggest thing in any form of mental health issue is to talk. That's the best form, overall form is to talk. So, and sometimes we have to do that about our spirituality as well. Very spiritually, we're not advancing. We have to talk about it sometimes. Sometimes you have to talk. And that's called Gurbani, which is Goshtya, Santanal Goshtya, the Guru Nal Goshtya. That's a conversation, having a conversation. And question 8, at the root of suffering, how do I build a healthy identity, confidence, boundaries, ambition, without strengthening ego? Where is the line between strong identity and home? So sometimes we look at that. I've heard some people say that don't use I in your conversation. I don't agree with that. I used it. That was the intentional use of I. Because Gurbani says a main all the way through it. Main nahi kish ho nahi. It's not about what I represents. When we discussed that in this week, it's worth watching Identity Systems on Home week 4 to understand that better. The word I isn't the problem. It's the belief system behind I that's the issue. So if I means, for a Gursik, I can mean tu. That's how Gurbani is. Gurbani's main means tu. If you understand that, that means main hai nahi hona. If you say main properly, tu ban janda ho. And you can, it's more in there, I can't go over it again. But here, if home is the root, so when we are confident in our ability, the ability that's the ability we regard Guruji's kirpa. So if we say, I've got some ability, but then mere kola, we're saying Guru di kirpa naal mainu cheez mili hua. Even if that's not in my language, it should be in my chit here. Even if it's not in my language. Now, it is not something we say identity. So as soon as we associate it with our identity, that's when I feel home mein aafe. So anything mere kuch achieve kita hove, je main kita, that's it, we're done. Fir hun oh main vich aa gaya, meri identity aa gaya, sara kuch. So Guruji, when winning wars, said that the victory is his. So Guru Sahib, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, Maharaj ke pe pai jeet meri, kripa kaal keri. Meri jit ta meri hai na, par kripa Vaheguru di hai sari. And then that's why that's wala. Vaheguru ji ka khalsa, Vaheguru ji ki fateh. Khalsa bhi Vaheguru da hai, fateh Vaheguru di hai. Aur kisi di nahi hai, kisi individual Sikh di nahi hai. Khalse di hai na. And Vaheguru di hai. So we have to be very confident, but we'd never become the doer. We remain the vessel for Vaheguru to operate through. A humble person can still be successful. So you can be humble and you can be successful. You don't have to be like arrogant and a person jira main karda hai. I was talked a bit before, we do boxing and coaching and all that, but jira boxers, I watch boxers, hai na. Boxers hai gaya jira bahut nimrata bahut tak kendi nahi hai. They don't say nothing. Evander Holyfield never, his coach said, I never heard this guy say a bad thing about another banda while he's training, never mind about in a press conference. And that's fighting. Manny Pacquiao, they don't say anything bad about anyone. Khabib, these MMA fighters. So you don't have to be an arrogant piece of work to be successful in this dunya. That's nonsense. You have to have faith in Waheguru. Na? Jo Waheguru vich bharosa hai, you can achieve anything. But oh sara kirpa. So that's how we do. So you can build a healthy identity. You can be confident. You can have the right boundaries. Na? You can have the right ambition. But that ambition, anything you achieve in your life, all I say to everyone, if you've got a career, us career the which do something for the panth with your knowledge, try and use it. If you know administration, help do some administration for the panth. If you know some IT thing, do it for the panth. If you've got law, do it for the panth. Do something what you know, do it for the panth. Give a bit back. That's what you should always think like that. So question 9, if a love for worldly things causes pain, that mean I should love my family less? How do I redirect love to Waheguru without becoming emotionally detached from people? That's fantastic. Because that's exactly the question gets asked at the camps. Once I did a homemade talk there and said, what to do? So if love my family, wrong. Because it's easy to quickly come to that conclusion. And these are the weeks we covered it in. What does everybody think? No one ever talks there anyway. It's a waste of time asking questions sometimes. If love for worldly things causes pain, does that mean I shouldn't love my family? Because that's the first thing that comes up when we did a love lecture, or we did about Dara. Then the first thing we're going to say is, well, then I shouldn't really love my wife, I shouldn't love my kids. That's just attachment. Is that right? Is that right? Should you say to Inyani, not to become I don't even know who you are anymore. Good, yeah. So we still have responsibilities. Everything still has a place. We're supposed to be gristi, which means family people. How do you think it changes? How does it change? So if your attachment decreases because you become attached to Waheguru, it does not now mean that you do not care, love, or be compassionate to your family. This is really important for like 17, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds. Sikhi will know they are. In their mind, they just think, right, well, I shouldn't get married now, and then I shouldn't do this, and I shouldn't do that. It's total misconception. So you see Waheguru operating everywhere, but you do not own things around you. They are gifts. That's our sochani. Now our sochani is Jay Prasad, Greh Sang Sukh Basana, Aat Pair Simro, this rasana. That on Simro, sorry, not Simro, this rasana. Guru saying, on je tere kirpa de naal, tenu family deti, Maharaj ne, utte sukh naal baitha tu. And you've got Maharaj Kirpa samjhino hun. Now look at them through the lens of Kirpa instead of looking at them as they're my family, that's my Sukh, that's my this, my that. So sometimes the biggest suffering as well. So when we expect something, we say, I want it like this. That's how we cause our Dukh. Say, I want it to be like this. And want anything in return, we've discussed that before. Love. If you got condition on your love, or love nahi hai, you can't have a condition. So you can't say, yeah, I love you as long as you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, Then we can't do that to Waheguru. A good way to look at things is ask if what you are feeling or doing actually feels Waheguru-like. So think about this. So when we say, how should I now behave towards my family? Good question is, how does Waheguru behave towards your family? How do you think Waheguru is thinking about your family? So, forget these. That's not what Gurbani is saying, na? Maharaj kende, chitte andar sabha ko, vek nadri head, chalayenda, ape de bade aaye, ape hi. So Guru saying, Maharaj the chit which everybody's in, Vaheguru's chit. We did a chit thing. Vaheguru the chit which everyone is in it. Vaheguru looks after everybody. ਉਹ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਜਪੇ ਨਾ ਜਪੇ, ਉਹ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਉਹ ਗੁਰਮੁਖ ਹੋਵੇ ਭਾਵੇਂ ਮਨਮੁਖ ਹੋਵੇ. That's how you got to think. What our Gurbani saying is, ਅਸੀਂ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਵਾਂਗੂ ਬਣਨਾ ਆ. ਹਰ ਜਨ ਐਸਾ ਚਾਹੀਏ ਜੈਸਾ ਹਰ ਹੀ ਹੋਏ. ਹਰੀ ਦਾ ਜਨ ਐਦਾਂ ਦਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਆਪ ਆ. So Vaheguru is unconditional. Vaheguru doesn't look at you to say, I'll do this for you. Hun mere liye kuch wapas de. He doesn't do that. That's the love you start becoming like. Your love becomes unconditional, but it's Vaheguru like. No? So then you can understand with family which we can still live. That doesn't make you, it makes you a much better person than a person who's really attached. Because attachment condition wale hunde ya. You look, mother and father, only kind of nyane di पालना कीती है हुंदा न्याना should do something back for me, है ना? In natural चीज़ है for a parent, but that's not love then, है ना? एक condition बन गया. So question 10, you said we can use chit to stay connected to Vaheguru. Yes, but when I'm in deep emotional pain, my chit becomes restless and scattered. What is the practical method that in that moment? So there's the chit things that we discussed in those weeks. So it's easy to say Dukh de vich on a chit la, but chit is the last thing. That's all over the place. The chit is remembering the problem all the time. The chit is saying what's the impact of the problem. The chit is going forward, backwards, doing all sorts of stuff. So it's normal, as we will always feel some pain in life. So jida si pehla kiya si, as stated before, we have to acknowledge our pain to understand it. So first thing you have to do is you have to say, like, there's a problem. There is a problem, and you have to acknowledge it. You have to understand what it is. You have to see it for why it is first. No? Then Guruji gives us many methods to try and remember Vaheguru. So Guru Sahib ne ek method nahi dita sanu. Guruji is saying to us, it reminds us to remember in pain and happiness. It doesn't matter what it is. So that's the first thing. That's one method. Then Guruji says, do it while you're walking. A whole method ho gaya. Then Guruji is saying, before you sleep, when you wake up. Then he said, Maharaj says, Sangat vich hunakar. Then he said, jadon saah aanda ya. Maharaj says, saah aanda ya, saah aa gaya, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਸਤਤਕਾਰ ਗਾਉਣਾ. ਦੂਜਾ ਸਾਹ ਆ ਗਿਆ, ਉਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਉਸਤਤਕਾਰ. Guru saying, during happiness, during sadness, then Guru said, ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਵੇਲੇ ਉੱਠ ਕਰ. If you've got a problem, early ਉੱਠ ਕਰ. Wake up earlier. Watch what your mind does. ਉਹ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮਾਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਮ੍ਹਾਂ ਹੁੰਦੀਆਂ ਆ. If you, people ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਭਿਆਸ ਕਰਦੇ, they'll understand what I mean. And at 2, 3 o'clock, that's all the sochas, all there. 2-3 ਵਜੇ. ਉੱਥੇ ਸੁਪਨੇ ਸਿਰੀ ਆਉਣ ਲੱਗ ਪੈਂਦੇ, all that. If you get up and ਉਹ ਖੰਡਨ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਉਹਦਾ. And even while you're talking, so like last week we discussed how you could do 2 things. Well, while you're talking, you can actually see Simran kar sakde. You don't have to say Vaheguru. You can think about. But sometimes you have to do part. Sometimes you have to listen to a Sikhi. So every you have to do different things. Okay, you might have to read a book, read autobiography. You might have to do something. You have to do something. You have to do something practical with your man, है ना? By other to someone. So use whatever works for you. But don't worry, as the severity of pain will pass, है ना? So it doesn't mean the pain's going to pass. It doesn't mean that pain's going to go away. For someone, that pain might stay forever. But they can manage it. Manage kar lende. They don't. It's not inflicting. Depression nahi ho rahi from it. You manage it, hai na? It's coping mechanisms. But what Gurbani is showing you different world. It's showing us something different. And there's some Gursikh who a future, the future da pata, past da bhi pata unanu. They find out about their past. Now, if you got to think, sometimes if you find out about your past, that might not be a very good thing for everybody. It's not a very good thing, that you find out that, there's one Sikh, he was, I don't want to talk too much about it, I'm disrespectful. Unu pata se kabhi his wife and his son's going to murder him, So, when you have to talk to someone, sometimes you've got internal galla, you can't talk to anyone about them anyway, you can't speak. But a person who starts realizing those things, that this is bad, that person's like this, that person's like this, that, sometimes that's not for you. So you shouldn't ask for them things. We talked earlier, some people saying, "Main ko experience hona chahiye, I should know am I going to achieve this? Am I going to do that? Ik Sikh, he asked by Rama Singh once. Rama Singh written a book about Bhakti, and usse kono puchi janda siga. He kept saying to him, I know this is slightly off topic, but he kept saying, he goes, am I going to be saved after this janam? Because this is my last one. And by Rama Singh said, a question had then in puchi de hunde. No, you shouldn't ask questions like that. Don't worry about it. Why Guru bharosa rakh. He wouldn't stop. No? Oh, hatiya nahi hai. And eventually by Rama Singh kenda, I think I can't remember what the number was. He said, 4 and or something like that. I got depressed. I was sick of the Kenny. I haven't seen him back in Sangat. Depressed ho gaya. Pe unhe kehta pe 4 jana mere rehndi or something like that. Sometimes you're better off not knowing, you know. Sometimes you're better off not knowing. But you're better off not knowing पिछले थोड़ा संबंध की सी with that person. So what it is, जो वाहिगुरु दिंदा है बहुत ठीक है थोड़े लिए. Just you should always think like that. So even when something distressful is happening, you have to manage the distress first. But बाद ਵਿੱਚ फिर तुसी भगती करनी again. You go back into your system, what system that you used. So question 11, we're nearly finished. If everything operates in Hukam, including my suffering, why should I try to change my inner systems at all? Is personal development interfering with acceptance of Hukam? That's a great question. It's a common question. If sab kuch bhaan vich ho raha hai, then why are we trying to do something about it? But why Guru? Well, number one, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about it like this. The fact that someone has even thought about changing their inner working is a huge blessing. That's the first thing. If a person actually sochda hai, andar mein kharab hai mera, my internals are wrong, the way I operate, and they thought, inu change karna main, that I would say, one of the initiation of kirpa to start ho gayi hai fir na. Understanding that and actually experiencing that Waheguru does everything's highest state. Now this is the problem here. The hard question to push there, everyone asks, am I doing it or is Waheguru doing it? No? If the dukh's happening, is that because of me or is it because Waheguru wants it to be for me? You know? And the samajh nahi aandi. And when we try to answer a question like that, Maharaj tells us all through Gurbani, pe edda kar tu, edda ut tu naam jap, everything. Then the shabds, when you get realization, that's what I'm saying, shabdi avastha di gal hundi hai, different avastha lai hai shabd. Some shabd are saying tu kar, some shabd saying tu karn joga hi nahi hega. The shabd are saying you can't. Tere bas vich nahi hai. You can't understand both of those things at the same time. I'll explain it in a minute. It does not operate in time. So, je assi Waheguru nu eh keh rahe hain, pe main kar raha hain, the day when a person reaches a certain avastha, you'll understand Waheguru the time which nahi hai na. So Waheguru already knows assi karna kiya, kadon karna, kidda karna. Because Waheguru is not in time. Akal purkha. Kal means time and maut. Akal means time de vich nahi hai. Koi maut nahi hai Waheguru di. So Waheguru knows, Waheguru the creation, Waheguru knows start kitte hoya, end kitte hona, kidda hona hai, and everyone's path in between. Waheguru knows all of that, hai. So we need our ego to do the work in his Guruji Shabad to kill it. So Maharaj Bella kare, this is a difficult part to understand. But if you understand this, then you'll Bella home di lord hundiya. First, home dirag rog hai, daru pi is samay Guru. Kehande ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ दारू भी है, ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ medicine भी है, ਇਸ home ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰੇ ਜੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਤਾਂ ਗੁਰ ਕਾ ਸ਼ਬਦ ਕਮਾਏ. ਜੇ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰਨ, then you home first you're going to use it pe bhakti ਕਰਨ ਲਈ. You have to do that. Home has to change. So there is such a thing as home being good. There is such a thing as that. ਜਿੱਥੇ ਆਪਣੀ ਮੈਂ ਹੈ ਨਾ, ਇਹਨੂੰ ਚੰਗੇ ਪਾਸੇ ਲਾਤਾ ਉਹਨੂੰ. There is something like that. And that's part of the transformation. Eventually, ਜਦੋਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕਰਦੇ, ਉਸ ਹਉਮੈ ਨੂੰ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਮਾਰ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ. Kills it. But first you have to use that first. So first I have to say, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉੱਠਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ. I have to say that. First I have to say, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਨਾਮ ਜਪਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ. First I have to say that. I have to say, ਮੈਨੂੰ ਅੰਮ੍ਰਿਤ ਛਕਣਾ ਪੈਣਾ ਆ. ਇਹ ਲਾਈਫ ਇੱਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਲਾਈਫ ਮੈਂ ਜੀ ਸਕਦਾ ਹਾਂ. I have to do it. That's home speaking. That's not, but ਜੇ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ, if you cross over the line and ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਦੇਵੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ, ਫਿਰ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਤੇ. If you then say, more higher avastha is saying, ਮੈਂ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦਾ ਜਨ ਬਣਨਾ ਆ. That's different. I want to be lower than everybody. If you then say, Maharaj मैनू मेरे ते कृपा करके नाम मेरे हिरदे च वस जावे, a different चीज़ है from saying मैं अमृत छकन आया. That's a very different चीज़. If then it goes into saying, Maharaj मैं दर्शन करने थोड़े, पहला home में जो start होंदा है, then you have to, all that starts by that home में saying it first. Home में चंगा बन गया हूँ in its own way. Home can never really be changa because it's very self-centered, है ना? पर ਉਹਦਾ self-centered ਹੁਣ ਭਗਤੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਨੇ ਅਲਾਈਨ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ. That's what Guru said. ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦਵਾਈ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ. So when we reach higher levels of Sikhi, only then can we see why Guru did everything in our life. First you have to understand, you have to say मैं has to do it. Eventually ਜਦੋਂ ਅਵਸਥਾ ਬਣ ਗਈ, you're going to understand ਵੀ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਨੇ ਉਸ ਸਾਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰੇ ਤੇ ਕਿਰਪਾ ਕੀਤੀ, then I did this, ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਨੇ ਕਰਾਇਆ, ਫਿਰ ਐਦਾਂ ਕਰਾਇਆ, then your language will change. You'll start saying ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ did it. It's a very hard concept for fickle mind to understand. But Sikhi in a nutshell is transitioning from I need to or I do everything to why Guru does everything. So pehla ithe start hunda hai. So even though we're saying we got home, even though we know Hukam is happening, Hukam does everything, fir bhi our man has to do the ardas. Jis din te apni home ne ardas kar diti, fir start ho gaya sab kuch. Home has to do the ardas first. Then we say eventually when the home ain't there and you could do ardas, fir person karma vich nahi hai fir. I know I'm saying big things now and they might not be all that easy. Fir karma vich nahi hai. Now we're in karma at the moment. Mere pichle karma, mere karma, oh mein karna hon. When a Sikh goes above that, fir karma vich nahi hai ho. Then they're in free will properly. Asi free will ch nahi hai, it's an illusion that we are. Maharaj ne idam bana rahe, pe Maharaj gupt ya. Maharaj didn't show us. He himself, है ना? So this is the final question. But if pain can become happiness depending on perspective, is there any pain that should not be reframed? Abuse, injustice, oppression. How does Sikhi deal with collective suffering without minimizing it? And we discussed some of these here. We didn't directly answer that. What does everybody think for the last question? The quicker you answer, the quicker you'll go home. What do you think? So is there some dukh? So some dukh, we can reframe it. So let's say I get some dukh. Mere life which dukh aa jave, I lose my job, let's say. For me, that was a really dukhy thing. But I can reframe that to say, maybe I'm going to get something better from this. Maybe Vaiguru's got a different plan for me. Maybe I'm going to be more spiritual now. Maybe I'm going to get a better job and more money, etc., etc., etc. These other things, can you reframe them? Just say, chalo, that abuse was meant to be. If as a Khalsa Panth, you know that on Epstein's Islands, you just said, chalo, theek hai, let's reframe that, shall we? Or something happening around you where there's abuse going on. Should we just reframe it? Should we say, chalo, pana man lo Maharaja? So Sikhi eda nahi kar rahi hai na. So what Guru is telling us is, part of a Gursikh life is to fight injustice and bring the world back to Tarti Sadhki. Sadhan di Tarti ya. Khalsa da mission is ga Khalsa Khan mein so SGPC out hai. But jara or the land of the Sadh Sangat. Asari Tarti Sadhan di Sangat was supposed to be that jithe dekhiye utte bhakti ho rahi hai. But the creation of the Khalsa was for this. When we reframe it, it's for our own internal handling of the pain. So we can reframe something and say, हाँ, आ चीज़ पाने विच सी, but फिर भी खालसे विच जागृता आया inside. That say that thing gonna stop now. You can say, हाँ, ठीक हो. Even Maharaj, talked about जब काबल ते मुगल आ गए सिगे. Maharaj still saying that from a dukh, बहुत dukh. He says, बहुत dukh बहुत लगा to see it. But फिर भी Maharaj दा पाना सिगा. But what Guru is saying is, जिथे oppression ना, Sikh doesn't, Sikh chalde nahi hai, but Sikh will handle it internally. You won't become depressed by it, you know? And so it's for handling our own internal pain, but it does not mean that we tolerate abuse or injustice. It means we're healthy enough to fight against it. That's what it's for. We're making ourselves healthy enough. So andron asi theek hai, now you can fight the injustice, you know? They both go hand in hand for a Sikh. सिर्फ भगती नहीं है, महाराज कहते शक्ति भी नाल आ. It's power as well. Power. Now, Gurbani tells us that the virtuous do good for all. That's what's called parupakar. Hai na? Par upakar. Par means somebody else's. Upakar means onanu spiritually lift karna. Hai na? As they are protected by Vaheguru. It also assures that us, Gurbani assures us that sinners will always lose and saintly souls always win. Bani which it's all the way through. By Bhagatan di sada tu rakhda har diyo, tur tu rakhda ya. Maharaj will always, if you try to do right, Maharaj thodi protection karni hai. This doesn't mean, what it doesn't mean is that you're not going to die fighting for that. It doesn't mean that you might have to die fighting for it. But that's not your end. As Gursikh sanu pata hona na. So one big thing that you all know, ek cheez we're taken away from all of this, when we die, we're not dead. Na? Jehड़ा साडा सुख दुख आ, ਉਹ ਸਾਡੇ as journey ਦਾ ਆ. It's just a journey of this life. It's a journey of this life, है ना? What we do is we sail our way through it. ਇਹਦੇ ਤੇ waves भी आने आ, ठंड भी आ जानी है, settling of पानी is going to happen, sometimes wave भी आ जाना है. But it's just a journey, है ना? उस journey ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਕਬੀਰ ਜੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਵੀ even us, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਮਾੜਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੋਚਣਾ ਇਸ ਵਾਰ. ਵੀ कबीर गर्भ ना कीजिए, रंक ना हसीए कोई, अजो सुनाव समुद्र में क्या जाना क्या होए. कबीर जी कहते किसी ਨੂੰ you don't laugh at someone's दुख, ਕਿਸੇ ਦਾ ਦੁੱਖ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਉਹਦੀ ਨਿੰਦਿਆ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਨੀ. ਕਿਸੇ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਬੇੜੀ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਪਾਣੀ ਤੇ ਆ, your boat's on sea, because ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਤਾ wave ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਆਣਾ ਹਲੇ, you don't know where it's going to come. So this is how a Sikh navigates life. ਸਾਡੀ ਲਾਈਫ ਹੈਗੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਦੁੱਖ ਸੁੱਖ ਆਉਣਾ ਆ, ਦੁੱਖ ਸੁੱਖ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਫਿਰ ਗੁਰੂ ਦੀ ਭਗਤੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਸਟਾਪ ਹੋਣੀ. Not going to stop. Doesn't matter. And if you have to do good for that, to remove that dukh, if it's dunyavi dukh, it's not tolerable, if you Sikh mar jaoga, it doesn't matter. So that was the end of 10 weeks of Dukh Sukh. Hopefully you learned something about how our gurus makes us think about it, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਿੱਦਾਂ handle ਕਰਨਾ. And the main thing is, at the end of it, is ਜਿਹੜੀ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਸਾਡੀ, how we incorporate that, because that's the bigger picture. The bigger picture is when we do leave this dunya, that it doesn't matter. Guru says, bhai pavan jo mitaya ral gaya na. I forgot the pankti, pavan vich pavan ral gaya, mitti vich mitti ral jani hai, and jyot is going to go back to the jyot, na. And this was just a little chapter. A chapter is a short idea. It wasn't even that big. It's only a small chapter for us. So that's how we live our life. And every chapter, it will go past. Time's going to finish. Our time's going to finish. But you got a very, very positive future. Saryanli. What positive future? Je Vaheguru da di bani and Maharaj da naam hirde vich vasya hove. The future ta bahut chaddi kala hai. It's बहुत beautiful, है ना? So ਸੁੱਖ ਦੁੱਖ ਉਹ ਝੱਲ ਲੈਣਾ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਹੈਗਾ, it doesn't matter. ਬਹੁਤਾ ਫਰਕ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਣਾ. ਬਸ ਸਿੱਖ ਨੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦੇ ਚਰਨ ਨਹੀਂ ਛੱਡਣੇ. So we're going to finish off with Simran and then ਫਿਰ ਹੁਕਮਨਾਮਾ ਤੇ ਸੁੱਖ ਆਸਨ ਫਿਰ ਹੋਣਗੇ. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ 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 ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ.